Welcome to the City of Santa Barbara Harbor Commission regular meeting for January 18th. Welcome everybody out there. Welcome my fellow commissioners. We have one commissioner who has another obligation, but we might as well do a roll call and get that on the record.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner Ford?
Here.
Commissioner McRae is absent. Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Here.
Chair Stedman?
Here. All right. Any changes to the agenda, Director Wilshire?
Chair Stedman, no changes tonight.
Excellent. Nico?
Yes, this is general public comment, so we currently have no hands raised in Zoom, so we can move to our in-person public comment. We have 3 slips that were submitted. First, we have Sridhar Subramanian, then Michael Riley, and then Judy Hawkins.
All right. Yeah, thank you all. I have been a community member here since, I would say, 96 or so, off and on in Santa Barbara. I've even at some point moonlit, if that's a word, for the Independent, coming to some of these council meetings and writing about them. And I was shocked at how this particular sequence of events have gone on in the sense that I first heard about it from Judy that the Ledbetter restroom areas were going to get renovated, and then I saw the rationale, I saw the plans, and I looked at it, and we had an equivalent response, I thought, to all the issues that were raised, which is, there's safety issues, granted, because the restrooms are all open, so people can abuse them, understood. But we said, well, why not just lock them up at night, like the other restrooms are being done with? And that thinking hasn't somehow, transferred to the administration, because the response that I got to a letter that I sent out was that, vagrancy is an issue, to security is an issue, people are urinating, defecating, all of those are happening. The thing of it is, we never see that, and all we see are when we go swimming there, and I'm a recent swimmer, I just started like 2 years ago, and I've never seen some of these issues that have been witnessed by others. And it has been a really joyous experience for me. And so I'm really puzzled why this would happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Michael Riley.
Hi. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Michael Riley. I've been a resident of Santa Barbara for over 40 years, and I'm a regular user of the Ledbetter Beach bath facility. I have to echo the response about the process, because it feels like decisions have been made that a lot of us who are regular users didn't know was even on the table. And I just question the transparency of the whole process. The severity or the significance of the changes are such that I think it compromises those of us that use the facility the right way. If you came down and saw from 6 o'clock in the morning till I think any hour of midday on, you go from a transition of kiteboard or morning swimmers to kayakers to paddleboarders to ocean recreationalists, and then midday you start getting your kiteboarders, and there's just a whole community of people that use that facility, and we use it the right way. We shower, we change, we use the bathroom facility. And I echo the response. I don't ever see the issues that you have as far as public safety. I have not seen that at all yet. Maybe it's happening after hours. I echo that we lock it up. But I just, it's a shame that the people that are using it the right way might be punished if we take down those wind walls and we rearrange the showers and we do away with the changing areas. I think that will just make changes that don't need to be made. I'm a retired elementary school teacher over 30 years, and one of the early lessons I learned in teaching was that you don't keep the whole class in for the behavior of a few if you need to make some changes. And I feel like the people that are using it the right way are going to be punished if these significant changes are being made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Judy Hawkins, and we do now have 2 hands raised in the Zoom platform.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm also a Santa Barbara resident of over 25 years and enjoying the facilities at the Ledbetter Beach. We represent hundreds of community members who value these facilities as they are and use them every day, as Michael said, from a variety of water sports and beach going. First, we're extremely frustrated and even insulted, I'd say, by the insular process that while claiming to invite community engagement on this renovation. So we first heard about the project last month from a new floor plan that was posted at the restrooms. Over 20 people attended the public meeting on December 14th, and we were told at that time by the project engineer that the plans were not finalized, that they were not in stone. We were encouraged to submit our comments and alternate solutions and understood that we would be considered in finalizing the design. We immediately mobilized to gain representation, to hear voices that were not present at the meeting. We spent hours and hours over the holidays self-organizing and creating a really clear, concise, and useful feedback to the project, which was provided in a community letter. That letter's been signed now by over 50 users and growing every day. We're still getting more and more signatures from folks in the community, only to be told last week that the renovation is moving ahead with plans that we're told are from 2013. And we basically, 3 things. We fully support the addition of the ADA restrooms and accessibility that are part of this plan. We specifically oppose the demolition of the 2 angled shower and wind walls and the outdoor changing rooms, which really enable these diverse recreational groups to shower and change and socialize, including over 150 City College students that use these facilities as part of their classes at the beach. The wind walls also help protect the showers and drains. So specifically, we'd like to know what was the purpose of that committee meeting on December 14th, if not to invite community input, and was it in response to a grant or something else that we are unaware of? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we do have 2 hands raised. Ann Castleberg and Anna Marie Gott are the 2 hands raised. And so if anyone on the Zoom platform would like to speak, please make sure your hand is raised within the platform. So Ann Castleberg will be first. You are unmuted and can go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. I find it incredibly insulting that people ask for input and then totally ignore it. I also am a swimmer, and those facilities have been great for us, and I don't understand the rationale of spending money to demolish things, to put back something that the people who use the facility don't want and don't need. I think that the ADA upgrade could be done without a lot of expense, and some gates on the private changing areas would maybe alleviate any overnight bad behavior. But I agree, I've never seen anything bad going on there. One of the things I read in the letter from the project manager was that the local businesses, quote, businesses, there's only one, so I'm not sure what businesses she was referring to, had reported seeing naked people at the showers. Well, knocking down the walls is certainly going to help that problem. Anyway, those are my comments, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we have Anna Marie Gott. Anna Marie Gott, you are unmuted and can go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. One thing that I would actually recommend that you do after having heard all of these public comments this evening is to schedule on your next meeting a item on your agenda that would actually tell you what is happening at this particular restrooms regarding the changes and regarding the public outreach that has occurred. One of your speakers said that this was plans from 2013. Well, what exactly went on in 2013 in terms of community outreach to actually get this particular plan regarding demolishing the walls and the changing areas, et cetera? I think that every single person here would like to see the ADA upgrades, but what they are really concerned about is the rest of the functionality regarding the exterior of the building. You know, taking down the shower walls and things like that, it seems really ridiculous, especially when there seems to be some easy solutions regarding, you know, closing the bathrooms and gates that could easily be incorporated into the design right now. And I think you also need to really ask yourself, the plans went to the ABR consent board in July of last year and were finalized. So they received their PDA in July of last year, but in December of last year, you know, almost 6 months later, someone went ahead and organized a community meeting and was seeking input from the community. That kind of seems backwards to me. So I don't know why that meeting happened. I don't know if there was a requirement regarding a grant that there had to be community outreach, and then they figured out, oh my gosh, we didn't have any, so we need to actually do this now. But then they completely ignored all of the input and just told these community members last week that they were moving ahead. And right now, the plans are in the building department. That means that once they get the building department sign off, those plans are finalized and absolutely no changes are going to happen. So I really think that you should agendize an item on your agenda for next month and have someone come and explain what the heck is going on and why isn't the community even being listened to. And
Ms. Scott,
beyond all of this,
your time has
Thank
expired.
thank you.
may I make one additional comment?
Yes, one comment.
Okay. There should have been a yellow sign notifying everyone at that restroom last year that there was a project that was going to happen. It doesn't even sound like that occurred. And so that's, I think, a red flag. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one additional speaker slip that was submitted, Carol Shaw.
I understand I have two minutes. I think and this is based on the previous speaker as well. We have issues of due process, notice, transparency, and in terms of governance and public input, I think we have to back this up, slow it down, and figure out how to make this process something that embraces what the public needs and I think we deserve as taxpayers. I also am responding in terms of Lynn Burridge's letter. They talk about the ADA, it's 10 years after the fact. We waited 10 years, let's wait maybe 10 months, about the showers. They're supposed to be ADA compliant. As somebody who has, my nephew has been in a wheelchair all his life, and I was the primary caregiver for 2 people through hospice. And my mother in particular was a swimmer, and I made it my business to make sure she swam, despite the fact of failing health and limited mobility. I give the current existing facility thumbs up. The column showers that replace it are a poor substitute. There's nothing to lean on, there's nothing to block the water, there's nothing to put your possessions on, and if you think about a wheelchair, it's at the wrong level. This is not ADA compliant, in my opinion. The existing one is. The other issue I want to address is at the community meeting, a number of community members specifically asked for the statistics, the evidence underlying the police reports, the custodial reports, because everything is expressed in very conclusory language. But the only evidence that was in the follow-up letter to that comment, okay, were there police reports? What exactly is this based on? Nothing was given back to the community from December 14th until not even today. And so those are my thoughts. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I really do hope that everybody reconsiders what this is doing to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you all for the public comments. And this is the first time I was aware of a lot of that stuff. And just out of respect for everybody who spoke, I was just wondering if the waterfront's aware, or if you guys care to comment regarding it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have a large list of capital improvement projects that we kind of run through the process, and so this was one of those. It has been on our CIP to renovate that restroom along with other restrooms for years, and so we kind of get to these as we can. Had no idea that this was going to cause the stir it was. One of the internal drivers of that, if you look in our CIP, one of the internal drivers is safety and security, and so there is a legitimate amount of vagrancy issues. I mean, you look up and down coastal California, and there aren't really agencies rebuilding walled structures on the coast. And so we were just kind of going from the template of Cabrillo Pavilion. You look at all of these facilities that make them cleaner, more ADA compliant. No problem kind of pausing and waiting until February, March, whatever the commission would like to do with that. It's just kind of us going through our capital projects in a responsible way. At the end of the day, the waterfront in the city and the police department and harbor patrol are the ones that are left with all of these facilities on the coast. We're the ones who patrol them 24/7. PD is the one who supports patrolling them 24/7. We're the ones who maintain them. Even this last storm showed that design is kind of getting undercut. And so the walls themselves are deteriorating and the facility is deteriorating. So when you remodel a facility, you're required by law to bring it up to ADA code compliance. So that's kind of a non-starter there, a discussion on can we or can we not change the floor plan for ADA requirements. That's the law, and so we must do that. The discussion of rebuilding walls, that's can be put on the table, or we can discuss that. It's just very counterintuitive to what's going on coastally, and it will result in continued misuse of that facility.
Okay.
Because in short, the walls themselves, they can't stay there in perpetuity. I mean, the facility has not been renovated since the 60s when it was put in, and so if not 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, eventually you have to replace roofs, replace walls, and those walls do need repair and replacement. So it would not be staff's recommendation to tear them down and replace them with something similar just because of the issues that occur there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Director Wilshire. I think we have a speaker. Commissioner Cohen would like to speak.
Oh, yeah, I guess I just wanted to know, was the plan brought to the commission at any time, or was the plan determined with staff? I don't know what our role is in all of this, so I don't know if we have any role at all. We don't have I would assume this was like planning commission, so.
No, Commissioner Cohen, good question. And I just want to caution, this item isn't on the agenda, so I don't want to get in too much of a discussion. Both sides didn't really have an opportunity to be here. So I can kind of speak to our capital improvement project process, which goes through Harbor Commission yourselves. We take an ancillary look at all of the projects that we're proposing. We're going to be going through that in the next few months for our FY25 projects and beyond. The city has a 5-year CIP plan with a list of all of the projects that are going to occur in the city. Not all of those projects rise to the level of major public review because the city is engaging in so many capital projects at any given time. And so you don't necessarily know when there is going to be this level of pushback, but there were public meetings prior to now involving this project. So,
I guess my question is more of a purview question, like, is this under our purview? Because I didn't know that it was, so I'm just kind of.
No, not necessarily, but the staff would love Harbor Commission's input and appreciates hearing from public on these sort of things, and so it helps guide our projects, but eventually we need to kind of do these to an engineered way and a way that makes sense for us to maintain them going forward.
Sure.
So the discretion over exactly how capital projects are completed is not necessarily Harbor Commission's purview, but we would appreciate and love your input on that sort of thing.
That's what I was kind of getting at, because I think sometimes we have people come here and speak, and like, we feel, compelled, and we hear what they're saying, and sometimes it's not anything that we have any control over. It's just not under our purview, and so I think that can be sometimes, that's what I'm after. So this is really not under our purview.
Not from a sort of design and construction point of view, but definitely from sort of a impact to the waterfront and the harbor community point of view.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sure. Commissioner Nelson?
Is it appropriate for us, since you typically and routinely at Harbor Commission meetings have reports from your division chiefs, most notably facilities? Is there any reason why, as part of our next meeting, Brian Adair couldn't talk to us about the process and how he or you made the decision to ignore the input that was received from, it appears to be, a large number of individuals who enjoy the facility as it is? Can we do that?
Yeah, we can certainly agendize this for our February meeting.
I would like to see that. If it requires a motion, I would be willing to make it. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's why I was trying to say, if it's part of the routine reporting of
The facilities report, right?
facilities,
Yeah.
that it would include this project.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll look into that for February then. Great. All right. Thanks, Director Wilshire. Okay, move on to the next agenda item, work group reports. Was there any work groups that met or subcommittees that met that would like to speak on behalf? Okay, I know budget is probably going to meet sometime in February or March. We'll have a budget presentation today. Move on to item number 1, the consent calendar. Mr. Lopez, can you please read item number 1?
Yes, this is item 1, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes from the regular meeting of November 16th, 2023.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
So this is a motion by Commissioner Cohen, seconded by Commissioner Nelson to approve the consent calendar as recommended. Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Aye.
Commissioner McCray is absent. Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimously with Commissioner McCray absent.
All right, we're ready to move to new business. Getting a lot of work tonight. Nico, can you read that second item, please?
Yes, this is item 2, fiscal year 2024 mid-year budget report. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive and review a status report on the Waterfront Department fiscal year 2024 mid-year budget revenues and expenditures.
Good evening, Chair Stedman, commissioners and members of the public. My name is Cesar Barrios. I am the Waterfront Business Manager. Today I will provide a brief mid-year report of fiscal year 2024, which ended December 31st of 2023. Jumping straight into numbers, we're going to look at revenues. I'm happy to report that our revenues are up 6.4% compared to last year at the same time. However, we're seeing the property management program is tracking 0.8% lower than last year at the same time. This decline can be attributed to several factors, including a reduction in revenues from food service and commercial leases. And these reductions are primarily due to adverse weather conditions we had in the fall that had a negative impact on our properties, as well as tenants that are currently facing some hardships due to the current economic climate, which is leading to decrease in percentage rents, which is a primary driver of our revenues. Moving on to financial management, the program consists of investment interest earned on department's reserves. Interest revenues at mid-year are up 38.9%, which is equivalent to $42,713. That's compared to last year at the same time. This category represents interest income in our financial management program, which varies depending on the department reserves and the prevailing interest rates out in the market. Moving on to parking services, the revenue program has seen a significant improvement. In the last half of the fiscal year, it's currently up 9% over last year, and that's an equivalent to $195,886. Through mid-year, all the waterfront parking lots show an increase over last year at the same time, and that also includes visitation rates. So not just the increase, because we did have an increase in parking fees July 1st of 50 cents, but we're also seeing an increase in visitation. Moving on to marina management, revenues are up nearly 11.4%. That's an equivalent to $448,710 over last year. Sleep permit transfer fees remain strong, up 9% compared to last year at the same time. And to give you some perspective, that we had 62 sleep transfers since July. It represents about $840,000 in revenue. Visitor fees are up 8.4%, while liveaboard fees are down just over 1%. It's a very minimal amount, but we're seeing a decline in liveaboards this half year. So as far as revenue projections, we're projecting to end the fiscal year slightly behind the budgeted revenues. The main factor is estimated reduction in property management revenues due to tenant rent deferments. These rent deferments will reduce revenues, but aim to provide financial relief to the businesses that have been impacted over the last few months. As you may recall, currently the Anchor Rose, it's on its second month of a rent deferment, and one of the items we're discussing today is for a second business. On that regard, the property management program is expected to finish the year 4.3% below budgeted revenue expectations, which that includes the harbor and the wharf food service revenues, having the greatest impact, again, primarily due to the rent deferments. In financial management, excuse me here. Their interest revenues is expected to come close to revenue projections, which is a good projector. However, this number will vary depending on the reserve balances and interest rates, which at this time we haven't not received those numbers from our finance department, so I'm not able to provide those specific numbers to you. Then moving on to parking services, although the recent rainstorms and coastal flooding had a significant impact in our parking lots, we're projected to exceed budgeted revenues by nearly 2%, due to the increase in visitors, and we'll see a slight increase in visitor numbers in the fourth quarter. The marina management program is expected to remain on track to meet budgeted amounts through the economic outlook of this market remains uncertain. We left a neutral variance there because we're expected to meet budget, but we it's uncertain how the market is gonna move in the next few months, especially following these storms and the economic climate. Okay, so moving on to expenditures. This slide shows the mid-year actual expenditures at $9,321,382,000, or 48.2% of the annual budget. That includes the encumbrances of just $1.1 million. With that, salaries and benefits are below the budget expenditures at mid-year point. The mid-year savings are mainly the result of positions being held vacant, primarily the harbor operations manager, which is held vacant for a big part of quarter 1 and 2, in a number of hourly positions in parking and facilities. On special projects, this includes the cost of the July 4th fireworks, as well as the cost for used oil or disposal of used oil in the harbor. In capital outlay transfers, these are funds allocated for capital projects, including Stearns Wharf and harbor preventative maintenance that happens every year, upgrading of the parking programs and equipment, as well as the repower of a harbor patrol vessel. With the non-capitalized transfers, primarily this includes the cost of equipment, small equipment that's generally not included within a larger scope of a project, small parking equipment, as well as computer hardware. Debt service payments, shown here as principal and interest, are front-loaded. As you can see, the percentage is quite high. But they're resulting in a higher than budget expenditures at mid-year, primarily because they're projected and front-loaded through the first part of the year. And this table shows the waterfront department expenditures by program through December 31st of 2023, just to give you a more specific idea of how each program is performing. This table does not include the 1.1 million encumbered amount that we discussed in the previous slide. And those numbers are generally promised through these projects, but they're not included in here. So all the waterfront department programs are under this proposed budget. Expenditures are mid-year, except the facilities design and capital programs, which is a 60.2%, I'm sorry, expended at mid-year. This is due to the payments that are front-loaded in the first half of the fiscal year. Again, same process. Overall, the waterfront is on track to at mid-year, but holds the potential to fall behind depending on the economic climate. And with that, last year fee increases were critical to ensure sufficient funds to help replenish the reserves. We did a 50-cent increase to parking revenues, which translates to about $500,000. Same thing with a 10% increase in slip fees. That amounts for another $500,000 just to meet the demands and just to meet the status quo with our allocated costs. So on that regard, we will continue to monitor our expenditures through the rest of the year. We don't have any significant changes, and we're hopeful and possible we'll likely meet the goals for the fiscal year. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Mr. Barrios. I just have a question regarding the encumbrances, just because I'm trying to see how they fit in. But the 1.1 million of encumbrances, I don't understand how that's not part of the fiscal year budget. Like, if it's separate but not part of the capital outlay program, is it being paid, are we expected to pay those this year, or is that kind of like a combination of kind of like accounts payable over the course of whenever the project's complete?
Vice Chair Stanton would correct. Yeah, they are basically, they're contracts that we've signed off already on, so these are amounts that we are going to pay by the end, we expect to pay by the end of the year.
Oh, it is by
Some-
the end, okay.
Some may carry through, depending on the project, may carry into the following year, fiscal year '25, but the goal is to meet those, to plan to pay those by the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, thank you, Caesar. That was a good, that was a nice update. Just, I guess, two questions. One was, it was nice to see that the parking revenue was 9% above what we expected, but really interesting on some of the outside information we've been reading about how the fourth quarter of 2023 was kind of lower than what we wanted on tourism. Do you all have any theories on why parking kind of maybe surpassed expectations, or was it a really below estimate, or do we have any thoughts on why it was above what we thought?
Commissioner Anderson, so we did have the 50-cent increase to revenues as of July 1st. We had a significant amount. So if you compare that to the revenues from December of 2022.
Oh, so that was just comparing to the prior year. It wasn't our expectations.
Correct.
Gotcha, okay. And the last question, just something that stood out to me, lifeguards cost us, is it just, it's $125,000 a year, so all the lifeguards cost us including, is that just the hourly, or is that the vehicles and the maintenance?
That's, I believe it's just staffing.
Just staffing hourly, yeah, and that's just in the summer, right?
Correct.
Labor and more, okay. All
Yeah,
right, thank you.
And just to piggyback on that, Commissioner Anderson, Parks and Recreation Department runs the lifeguard program, so that's our portion of a share. So it's essentially an allocated cost, and so they hire the staff and kind of manage that program, and this is our portion that we pay into it, so.
That seems pretty good. Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen?
I was going to say on the fall numbers being down, I think it was, what was it? Was it even, it's 0.8%? Like, that's pretty good, actually, because as someone who depends upon the weather for their livelihood, I can tell you that a lot of us faced much, much worse numbers. So those storms, you know, I'm sure for anyone that's operating in the harbor can just really wipe it out. And we just, yeah, it just was, there was just so many of them. I was going to just ask a question. I know that you don't put in here the reserves, but I remember when we had our last budget that we were over budget. I think it was a couple million, or it was quite a significant amount of money. What happens to that? Does it just go into the reserve? And then the other question to that would be, what are our reserves at this point? Because I don't, you know, like to look at the bank statement too.
Yeah, no, Commissioner Cohen, it's a great question. So, yeah, at a high level, we are a closed loop fund. And so if we run a surplus, it goes into reserves. If we run a deficit, we pull from reserves to fund our deficit. Additionally, we fund our capital program out of our reserves. So we either, on an annual basis, we either fund our capital out of a surplus funds, or we dip into reserves to fund our capital. We shoot for 10% of our operating budget to reinvest into capital, so that's about $1.5 million to $2 million a year. So if you look at our total budget and over the last years, our total expenditures, including capital, are say 20 million, and our revenues are 18.5-ish. So we really depend on that surplus to fund our capital. We don't have our exact reserve picture right now. It's something that comes to us from finance. This was a good half year. I think this is really, the analogy would be kind of a company giving an earnings report that was positive, but we have a lot of headwinds against us. So we have that $2 million hole in our reserve still that we're looking to get reimbursement from FEMA, but that's still sitting there. Some of the big items, our insurance costs are going through the roof. So over the course of 5 years, we're kind of midway through that. They're going to go from about 300 and 400,000 a year to $1.5 million a year.
Don't we we don't self-insure?
That's for our self-insurance fund to pay into that. And so the city as a whole is kind of running at below the totals that we should have in our self-insurance fund. And so we're underfunding our self-insurance fund as a city.
Okay.
So each department has made a commitment to fund that to an appropriate level. We self-insure for a number of things, but we also use the private market for a number of things, such as property insurance. And so from 3 years ago to 3 years from now, our overall insurance bill at the waterfront will go from $300,000 to $1.5 million. So that's a little over $1 million that we have to come up with just to kind of maintain status quo. And so that headwind is building against us. We're looking at kind of 15 to 20% year-over-year insurance increases. So if you really kind of get into our budget and look at even this mid-year, the cost that we have control over, some of our labor and staffing, our supplies and materials, we're reducing those, and the costs we have no control over are increasing. And so it's kind of this balance to make sure we have enough money on hand to do what we need to do.
Is it, I take it then you're not prepared at this time to say what we have in reserves? Is that something that you could just fill us in on at some point? I mean, I'm just curious because, yeah.
No, that's a big part of the budget process, and so there's kind of a timing cycle of when we even receive that. And so there is still some moving around with those FEMA dollars, but we should be getting that within a month or so, and that is a crucial part of our kind of FY25 budget presentation when we have to project what we're going to be doing. So I'm waiting for those two. It really dictates how much money we can spend on capital and what we can do going forward. So I want those exact numbers as well.
Okay, great, yeah. One last question, Cesar. I noticed that it's had in here that there were 62 slip transfers. Is that a lot? Is that normal? Is that, because it seems like for the marina revenue, we're pretty dependent upon that to, to really bump up those numbers. And so I'm just curious, are people transferring a lot of slips?
Commissioner Cohen, good question. So it is higher than last year. I wouldn't be able to tell you what the average over a next amount of years. I can get back to you with that question. But overall, it is a pretty good number. I mean, considering the economic climate. I mean, a lot of times you'll see, as we're seeing in food service, we're seeing somewhat of a decline, especially with the weather conditions and just overall economic climate. And then we're seeing somewhat an uptake on slip sales.
Yeah.
Commissioner Coe, I can add to that a little bit. Our 10-year average on slip transfers sits around 60 or 80 a year. And so then COVID hit, and we were doing about 120 or more a year, kind of that boating frenzy. And so that still seems to be occurring. So 62 at the midway point is definitely on the upper end of our long-term average.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
Back to the economic climate and the headwinds that you're sure to encounter. Everybody read this article that basically, hotel room occupancy was off by 30%, and rates for the rooms was down low. I remember a conversation that I had with Visit Santa Barbara, Kathy at Visit Santa Barbara, and she suggested that her data analytics that she does, that she can take a look at Stearns Wharf and the harbor, and the fact that 60% of those who visit Santa Barbara find their way to the harbor or the waterfront of that. So how do we...
Commissioner Nelson, is your speaker on?
How do we make sure that the problem that is identified in her last report is not going to make its way to us? Because if they're off 30, if the hotels are off 30%, are we going to be off 30% in terms of our sales and our revenue sharing with our commercial licensees? And could we look at her report that was so widely publicized and see if there's any data there that gives us a hint to how that might impact us or already is impacted? Because what I'm thinking is that is for hotel rooms, but it'll be a little while before it shows up in a quarterly or biannual report for us. So is there a way that we can take a look at her data and see if it has some interesting facts about our facilities?
Commissioner Nelson, that's a very common question. So yes, we can do that. I mean, we do get some reports from Visit Santa Barbara and the Chamber, and a lot of times we see a parallel, like a function of, I mean, the waterfront overall is a function of the weather in general. And then you add the economic climate that's affecting everybody, let's say uptown or other cities and parts of the state. So, yeah, we are seeing a percentage that's equals oftentimes with other, for example, food service restaurants
Right?
in other parts of the city, that equates to what's happening down at the waterfront as well. But to answer your question, can we look at other reports and kind of predict what's, or just be prepared to see what this economic climate is going to look like? It's most certainly yes.
Because I just thought I recall her saying that she actually understands how people spent their time when they came to Santa Barbara and where they went, and whether they went to the harbor or whether they went to Stearns Wharf. And if that data suggests that fewer people are going, that's like a little signal for us in terms of dealing with headwinds. That's all.
Yeah, and I think the time that comes really into play is when we're developing our FY25 budget.
Right.
So we'll use all the data we can. So we meet with our finance department on kind of broader economic trends, and so we're trying to kind of pencil our best revenue estimates. It's really hard to have a crystal ball and tell what's going to happen with individual tenants and demand at the waterfront, but that would be the time. And I think we are in a space where we'll use that sort of data and say, FY25 is not looking as rosy. So we need to be a little more protective of our funds and figure out where we can offset that revenue or cut our expenditures in preparation for a maybe not so economically robust year down the road.
Good. Thanks.
Commissioner Ford?
Thanks so much. Along the lines of this interest in more data, certainly at the Maritime Museum, we're trying to figure out ways to keep better track of our foot traffic. For the parking service, does the staff keep any data about, for example, the number of cars or the increase in annual permits?
Commissioner Ford, yes, we do. And the parking services supervisor keeps track. We actually generate reports monthly of visitations, and which correlate to our revenues when we try to project what's going to happen ahead. But we do have vehicle numbers currently. We have, for example, Stearns Wharf, they track about 20,000 vehicles per month, average about 27,000 of the harbor. So we do keep that data, and it's available if needed.
Well, just this question about whether there still are more people coming, even though lots of other areas of revenue are down.
We are seeing a spike in visitations. So not aside from revenues and the 50-cent increase we had back in July, for the month of from July through September, we did see an increase by about 15% of visitors at the harbor and at the wharf. That's just the average as far as vehicle visitations. We do keep pedestrian counter data as well at the wharf. We recently acquired a brand new system that's very accurate. So we provide those numbers to the Wharf Merchants Association because they use that to plan ahead as well. So it's data that we have and we make available to our merchants.
Thank you. Also, I have a question about salaries and benefits being slightly under half of what's projected. When all positions are filled, do you anticipate that you will end up being above that 8 million number budgeted for the year?
I believe we'll be very, very close because we budget according to the positions that we have. So we're not adding any extra positions. So unless there are changes through MOUs where salaries go up, we wouldn't see a significant increase in salaries and benefits. However, we do see the benefit of a surplus when we have vacancies like we had in this past 2 quarters, primarily with the harbor operations manager position being vacant.
Yeah, Commissioner, our salary estimates are usually pretty conservative, and so as there's natural attrition, there's kind of always a vacancy. There's like a vacancy factor essentially when you're looking at your staff, and a lot of our salaries are budgeted at kind of mid-range of their salary, and so if we hire a new person, they often come in at a lower part in their salary. So it's pretty typical that even if we're fully staffed, there'll be some small portion of salary savings at the end of a given year.
Sure. Just wondering, since you did say that you were under because of unfilled positions. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Caesar. Nico?
This is item 3, Harbor Restaurant Emergency Repair Rent Deferment. Recommendation that Harbor Commission recommend approval by the City Council of a 3-month rent deferment for the Harbor Restaurant to provide financial relief to the tenant while they address emergency repairs and necessary cosmetic improvements.
Good evening again, Commissioners. So today I bring to you a proposal for a 3-month rent deferment for the Harbor Restaurant and Lombard's Grill, which is it's one business, just to make that point as well. It's one lease for Harbor Restaurant and Lombard's Grill, primarily due to their current interior repairs that they had to perform in the last month or so. This is very recent, from December, and which has caused significant hardship to the business, primarily due to the type of repairs they're having to do. So with that, I'd like to provide some background first. So the Harbor Restaurant is located at 210 Stearns Wharf. And as I mentioned, it recently experienced significant water damage during the December rainstorms, requiring emergency repairs. During the rain event, rainwater entered the ground floor through the kitchen, damaging the ceiling walls and essential equipment. While addressing the issue, though, the contractor discovered structural damage to the building, which includes the framing and the floor joists. As a result, the restaurant is currently closed while the building permits are being acquired. And it could be, unfortunately, a process that could take weeks, if not months, to get these types of permits, as you may be aware. So just to give you a perspective right here, here's the site plan illustrating the areas of the building being repaired, which is in yellow. And then Lombard's Grill, they are replacing the boiler area, which provides the hot water. The reason why they cannot operate that area, even though the main issues with the repairs are only happening at the Harbor Restaurant, which is downstairs. So we're hopeful that the permit process will move efficiently through the front counters of the building department. But again, it could take weeks, if not months. That being said, due to the extensive nature of the repairs and the temporary closure of the restaurant, the owners propose a rent deferment to help manage their financial obligations during this time. On that regard, upon review, the Waterfront Department granted a 3-month rent deferment for a base rent, which would take effect this month and last through the end of March of this year. So the rent due during this period will not be waived, but would instead be amortized starting April 2024 and will last through the end of the lease in December of 2028. This arrangement it's a very common practice for our department. I was recently here with a deferment for the Anchor Roast restaurant, as you may recall, for a similar, well, they're doing improvements, but overall, when they shut down, it creates financial hardship for these businesses. The total rent to be deferred during this proposed period is just under $175,000. And as I mentioned, this will be spread out through an amortization process through the end of their lease. On that regard, staff recommends the Harbor Commission recommend this approval to City Council, which will take effect in the form of a lease amendment in the coming month. This action will show goodwill on our part as a department, supporting waterfront tenants and who are showing commitment to improving their facilities and ensuring that they're safe for their visitors and patrons. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yeah, so on the 3-month rent deferment, is that what they asked for, or what did they? Is that what we just are proposing?
They, Commissioner Cohen, they had requested, we've been in discussions almost weekly with the owners of the restaurants. So originally, they had requested different forms of accommodations, either abatements of rent or additional months. Based on the current need of the restaurant, based on the type of work they're doing, a 3-month deferment is the appropriate amount of time to provide for them to complete these repairs.
But what did they ask for, is my question.
They had,
They asked for a lot more. I mean, they asked for 6 months rent abatement. They asked for 6-month rent deferral. Our standard practice is deferring rent whilst construction or whilst there's hardship going on, because it gets really difficult when we're in a position where a tenant is not paying rent and they're open for business. And so we really try and time the construction project. So we came back with the 3-month rent deferral.
But they had asked for significantly more,
They asked for
because I'm not surprised. Do we know if any of the structural damage was something that we would have, I mean, are they doing it all, or are we doing any of the repairs? Or it's our building, right, or the waterfronts?
Yeah, these repairs are under their purview and their lease right now, so they're doing an interior work and we're not involved in it at the moment.
Because my assumption would be it's going to take them a lot longer than 3 months to get permits to do this and to get the work done. I would expect that they'll be closed for much, much longer than this, as someone who just navigated that process. So I don't know. I mean,
Potentially not. So there's really two things here. There's kind of the long range plan to refurbish that building, the big project of all the deferred maintenance has kind of been left aside over the last 30 years. This is really them sort of repairing this emergency repair. So I believe they're going for an emergency repair permit, replace drywall, water damage, all this sort of stuff. And so they're trying to expedite that as much as they can, but this isn't the large scale renovation of the restaurant that they're kind of have been talking about or planning. This is really in response to water
but they're
damage.
closed right now,
They're
is that
closed
right?
now.
And when did they close?
Commissioner Cohen, they closed, I believe it was early January, primarily because they were not able to meet the requirements of the building department to continue the work. The work started in December, but the scope of the work became greater, therefore needed an additional permitting, which, as you mentioned, it could take months. We have another tenant that currently, it's still awaiting a permit. It could take 2 months.
It's a really difficult process to get through. And when you think you're through it, you're not. I mean, I would support giving them, I mean, I think that the 3-month rent deferment is, I don't know anything about their business. I don't know these people. I just assumed, because I have tenants that have been impacted by the storm as well. For most of them, I did actually do some rent abatement. So I would think that that wouldn't be unusual to give, given that they're totally closed right now. 3 months rent deferment is very generous, but they are going to have to pay it at that point. So I don't know how the other commissioners feel.
Commissioner Nelson?
Maybe it's the way you characterized it in the staff report, but it sounds like there was kind of 2 levels of problems here. That one were related to emergency repairs, and then the second was the overall state of the building interior, which is in dire need of repairs, which to me says there was a bigger problem than just the emergency repairs associated with the weather. And then when I looked at the lease that you were kind enough to give me, I mean, the maintenance and the making sure those structures are sound and safe is their requirement. And so my question is, one, did we allow the conveyance of basically they sold the lease to this company that's now dealing, that we're going to give the deferment to. But when they sold it, it was sort of out of compliance with the lease. So do we ever check? I mean, it sounds like these problems didn't happen yesterday. They've been building for a long time. And so it wasn't that problem shouldn't that problem have been addressed by the previous tenant before this? I mean, see what I'm trying to say is that if we took a look at the property at the end of the lease, or when we were being asked to look at it, asked to transfer the lease, we ought to make a decision or determination that the current lease is being complied with. And it sounds to me that there was maintenance deficiencies existed with the previous owner, and they just got passed along to the next owner.
Commissioner Nelson, yes, so we're well aware of the condition of the interior of that building. It's a large space. Back in 2021, when the lease was assigned, because it was
Right.
not it was an assignment of lease. Basically, we were not able to adjust any of the terms as far.
But the term required them to have the building in good repair, and it wasn't. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it's tough. I get what you're saying. It's very common. So you look at the Anchor Rose or Chuck's when they sell, there's an anticipation that the new buyer does their due diligence, assumes whatever that building is, and there's an expectation from us that there's going to be a large tenant improvement. In this case, that was semi-promised. The scale of this one is kind of bigger than anything we have. So we're still really close to that window. They've been kind of working these plans and talking with the planning folks about what they can and can't do in that building. So they're still very much planning this large-scale renovation. This is really just something that happened in the middle of that. And so with a lot of our leases, they're kind of turned over. You can look at Sea Landing to Santa Barbara Landing. You know, it's really common for a business to kind of change hands, either due to hardship or for whatever reason, and the new tenant comes in, puts money in and reinvests in that building.
Right, but we let it get there. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the previous tenant had an obligation to maintain the public structure, and apparently it didn't. And I'm just trying to figure out where can we interject and intervene and say, you're not in compliance with your lease. There's all kinds of, overall, a dire need of repairs. We ought to know that, particularly if we're going to just convey that problem to somebody else. And now we're having to deal with this deferment because the new tenant has to deal with the fact that we did not achieve the compliance that the lease required. I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm all for the deferment. But I'm just looking in the future with old buildings. Do we know the condition of all of our buildings, particularly the ones that are under a commercial lease? And when would we ever inspect to determine that a structure was in dire need of repairs? Do we ever do that? And if not, shouldn't we?
Commissioner Nelson, generally we do at the end of each lease. So it's a responsibility of the tenant to maintain that building, the interior of the building, up to code as set by the Building and Safety of the City of Santa Barbara. In this case, as an example, they had some water damage, and once they peeled the onion, there was significant, basically wood rotting down below that was not visible. And there was no sign of it being in that condition prior to removing that one layer.
Okay.
But once, up until the point when we get to go through an RFP process for a new lease, or there's a change in the lease, that's when our facilities manager will go into a building, we'll do an inspection and make sure that the building is sound for the next tenant that's going to take over.
Right, and that's my point. My point is lease renewal is lease termination and a new lease. And at the time that we do a lease renewal, we ought to take a look at the building, and not just the fact that the tenant, the existing tenant, paid the rent and was, basically complied with everything we asked them to do. I think we ought to do an assessment. I mean, in terms of, whether or not we're going to give them another 30 years and 2.5. I think we ought to make sure that in addition to their financial stability, that they've actually complied with the lease. That's all.
And Commissioner Nelson, just to add, also as part of this lease assignment that happened in '21,
yeah.
there was a plan, a business plan presented by the new owner to upgrade
To do this.
to upgrade the building, just significant improvements, which we're still discussing. So, we wish this would happen right at the start of the lease assignment. That way it could have been handled, it could have been planned a little bit better as opposed to being handled as an emergency.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor it. It just seems like we're stacking these things up now. We got a deferment at the Anchor Rose, the sushi place is closed down, this, you know, and I'm like, uh-oh, is this indicative of a larger problem than simply bad weather? So,
Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, I had two questions. One of them was right in line with Commissioner Nelson, which you guys hashed out a lot of it, but I guess my remaining question was, before we get the security deposit back to the tenant that's leaving the lease, what was done? How did we ensure that it was worth giving them the security deposit back?
Commissioner Anderson, mind you, we don't have a security deposit.
Oh.
We don't collect a security deposit. It's just based on the lease agreement, we just collect their rent.
Yeah, this wasn't a lease renewal, this was a lease assignment, so this was really just somebody conveying their interest in a lease. The exact same lease, no changes, no anything, so exactly as that term stands, and so they had a private-to-private business transaction. A lot of that is incumbent on the buyer to inspect, kind of know what they're getting. You know, we're not real estate professionals or inspectors, and so that business-to-business transaction generally occurs outside of our purview. When an owner wants to
Yeah.
sell a lease, move on from the business, they can put it on the market, they can say, hey, I don't want to deal this, turn it back to us, and we can RFP it. That's very unlikely because there's a lot of value in these leases.
So taking security deposits is not a practice that we do at the harbor?
Not on long-term leases.
All right. And then what about insurance? What kind of insurance does the tenant have to cover, what are our requirements for insurance, and what's their take on having insurance cover some of these expenses?
For insurance required to have, I believe, is up to basic commercial insurance, and then
Business protection insurance. So there's terms in there, and they can go after the claims for this. That doesn't really help the time frame of things, but they can certainly go back and try and make it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I share the sentiment with, it sounds like most people up here where we've got a tenant in there that not a great situation happened. I think the best course of action would be to continue having them in there and continue pursuing the changes and get it right. But it seems like, and it's a great topical discussion on our 5-year lease renewal, it sounds like maybe there's some room for improvement on the leases. So we'll look forward to having that discussion in '24. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Motion?
All right. Is there a motion?
Need one.
I'd make a motion to approve the deferral.
Second.
Nico?
Yes, this is a motion by Commissioner Stanwyck, seconded by Commissioner Ford to move forward with a staff recommendation. Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray is absent. Excuse me, Commissioner Nelson?
yes.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Yes.
Okay, and that motion passes unanimously with Commissioner McCray absent.
Can I make?
Commissioner Cohen, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just, one real quick comment. Do you know if they're going to Planning Commission for their changes, or are they just going to the Planning Department?
Commissioner Cohen, they're just going to the planning department based on the scope of the work, since they're not making any significant changes to the actual building. There's been discussion for them to create different or modify the building space, but
Okay.
that's a different project. Currently, they're just trying to address their repairs, which they don't have to go to plan, they don't have to go to.
I just don't know if it's appropriate, or if you do it already, for your department to talk to planning department and say, hey, this is our tenant, can you, make sure that there is eyes on this and let us know on the timing or something along those lines. My concern is just that this could turn into a very long closure, so.
To your point, we've been actively engaged with the building department since day one.
Great.
Okay, item number 4, please.
Yes, this is item number 4, 2024 Prioritization Workshop Review. Recommendation that Harbor Commission discuss the outcomes and priorities from the January 9th, 2024 Prioritization Workshop and take action as necessary.
All right, Chair Stedman, Commissioners, is there opportunity to provide a little bit of a debrief on the prioritization workshop we had on January 9th? Next slide. So just a little recap on some of the details. All seven of you were present on January 9th. So this was our kind of second annual prioritization workshop. So a meeting was held in the waterfront classroom on January 9th at 4 p.m. So the main objectives at a high level were kind of a recap on everything we covered in 2023. We discussed and prioritized topics for 2024. And we did use that Mentimeter interactive polling software, which I think worked well to gather input. Next slide. So diving right into some of the outputs from the meetings. With respect to, we asked a number of questions and used the polling software to gather input from all of yourselves. So with respect to frequency of receiving operational updates, so these are our director's report, facilities report, harbor ops report, and business report. So there was unanimous support of continuing our current practice of leaving these updates to the discretion of staff on an as-needed basis. So easy there. Next slide. With respect to receiving staffing updates, so this is us updating the Harbor Commission on new hires, recruitment process, all that sort of thing. There's a majority agreement to continue receiving these regularly throughout the year as they arise. Next slide. So as we just spent a little bit of time, so reviewing leases is a big part of what the Harbor Commission does. Staff brings all of our lease activity to the Commission for review and recommendation. So again, the three major categories of lease activity are renewals, amendments, and assignments. So the next couple slides capture the Commission's preferences on how we deal with these at our Commission meetings. So this first slide shows a majority preference, continue dealing with these lease renewals on the consent calendar. And that's really unless staff feels there is a more complex or it warrants a full presentation. And so this last example with the Harbor Restaurant was a perfect example. So that could have been handled on the consent calendar, but we thought that there was kind of more to it, so gave a full presentation. Next slide. Again, with lease amendments, so lease amendments are changes to the existing lease terms, and so the Commission was unanimous with the similar preference that we continue our practice on the consent calendar unless we feel there's more complex need for a full presentation. Next slide. And with respect to lease assignments, so it was a little more divided on the assignment of leases. So the majority preference was still to maintain the status quo of reviewing lease assignments on the consent unless we felt it warranted a full presentation. So, and just a reminder, lease assignments can be as simple as a business or owner changing their name, but they can also be a lot more complex. So including a business selling the lease to a new entity or changing the ownership structure of the business itself. Next slide. Just like we did on our first item, we provide backward-looking budget updates to the Commission. So the Commission was unanimous in the preference to continue receiving these twice a year, so biannual, so once at mid-year and once at the end of the year. And then just a reminder, these backward-looking budget updates are in addition to our full-blown budget forward-looking process, which is coming in the coming months. Next slide. So we certainly try and carve out time in Harbor Commission meetings to receive informational and educational presentations. So these are often from outside agencies or other city departments. The hope is that they can complement things that we're currently working on. So this current slide shows the Harbor Commission's preferences for informational educational presentations, with the top three being State Lands Commission, local commercial fishing operations, and kind of an economic business development related presentation. So staff can hopefully use this list to kind of help schedule speakers in the coming year. Next slide. So in addition to the ranked list that we just provided, so on screen are a few additional topics for informational and educational presentations. So the ones circled in yellow were just the ones that were repeated multiple times, so kind of the highlight ones. So there was an interest in informational or educational presentation on creation of a master plan or strategic plan. So staff can use this information to kind of work to get a speaker or a topic on this as well. Next slide. So a summary of the kind of the informational educational presentation. So based on the priority setting workshop, staff can work to get the following speakers. So we can get somebody from the State Lands Commission, a presentation on local commercial fishing operations, a speaker from Santa Barbara Chamber of Commerce, presentation on ocean acidification, presentation on Ventura Channel Islands, and possibly a presenter from the airport or another harbor. Just a note that airport has recently gone through a master plan process, so that might be a way to glean some information. There's a lot to cover, so another reminder that we typically slot in 3, 4, maybe 4 tops of these kind of per year. We don't have a ton of meetings, and so really trying to link those up with policy stuff we get into would be good, but this is really helpful for us to kind of go out and try and get these people and make sure they're available to speak. Next slide. All right, and last on the list was these larger kind of policy and work efforts. So based on the Commission's priorities, the top 3 were slip regulation policy. This was sort of intentionally broad. This covers a lot of the stuff that we deal with. So transfer fees, terminations, really just the way we manage all of our slips. So still some interest in focusing on that. Anchorage and mooring policy, which is kind of big and getting bigger, and vessel insurance policy. So knowing that these are the efforts that kind of take more time, we usually start off with some lead information gathering, Harbor Commission meeting presentations, and then those usually kind of bleed into work groups, larger kind of policy efforts. So these are really the big, larger actions that we can take on. Next slide. And then addition, so the major policy topics ranked, so this kind of gave you all a chance to add some additional topics. So again, the ones circled in yellow were just the ones that were repetitive, so the kind of the hot topics that weren't on the previous list. And so staff will use this. The main one there is sort of being able to provide input on the city's advisory group guidelines, and so staff will work to get that on the agenda as well. Next slide. So our main takeaways from the larger policy and work efforts, the top priorities were continuing to work on slip policy, looking into policy revisions for anchorage and mooring, vessel insurance policy, and allowing for more input on the citywide advisory group guidelines. And so what we can do is really take these priorities and flesh out a draft calendar for our coming year. Next slide. So I gave that a crack. Here's a draft calendar. Again, everything's that can change, but this is really nice to sort of tee up not only for us to be able to get speakers and kind of get our material together for policy stuff, but it's nice for the public. We're going to make this available, and so it kind of gives the public a better view into kind of what we're dealing with and when. So I'm going to try and kind of update this as this goes. The highlighted pieces in red are the ones that kind of came directly from the priority setting workshop. And so those have replaced other things that were other placeholders, but all of those red ones were really ones that came directly from that workshop. You can see kind of later in the year, fall, October, November, there's some TBD slots. It's nice to have this. Business always comes up. Sometimes we need to address things more than once. If we get into these policy items, it often takes multiple items. So it's nice to have those slots later in the year. I think that was the last slide. Next slide. Yeah, so with that, I'll turn it back to the commission for any input or questions.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to just comment to the commission real quick on just one of the items. I noticed for the educational topics, we had selected a guest speaker from State Lands Commission as the #1 topic. And just thinking back to some of the prior Harbor Commission meetings, we actually, back in March 2021, we did have Reed Baggiano from the State Lands Commission give a great presentation. So luckily, all these commission meetings are, recorded and televised. So I know I've gone back and used that for reference, but if anybody is kind of curious before we do get the presentation for state lands, that's available to us. It's great on rules, regulations, jurisdiction, but yeah, it was a great presentation that we have access to. So.
Commissioner Nelson?
I guess on that topic, I mean, you've got, what, 15 or 20 of these featured speakers. That's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take time away from the new business priority setting, policy setting items. So I was hoping that we could do more than just receive a presentation from these groups or organizations the way they want to do it, as opposed to having their presentation address a handful of issues, and particularly State Lands Commission. The State Lands Commission has their own leasing policy and how you determine market value and all of that, which is of real interest to me. So I don't know if it's possible when you schedule these speakers, if you could say, we are asking you to speak and possibly hit on the following topics. Is that a problem? And maybe you could do that, you two, you, John, you, and Adam, when you're putting the agendas together, you could try to make sure that it's relevant to some of our other policy discussions. That's all. Because you could see the circle, for example, on master plans and strategic planning. Well, that's what we want. We want to know, I mean, the harbor, the airport, you mentioned the airport. Well, they're doing an update of their 2014 plan. Our last planning adventure was in 1996. So, I mean, so we need to know how important this planning process is to them. Because, and to me, what we heard today from these folks that came to speak about the capital improvement, the swimmers, we weren't really involved in that priority setting exercise. And one of the things that I know the airport's doing is they're meeting with their constituents. And we don't have, strategic planning or regular planning exercise that meets frequently with our stakeholders and constituents. So for me, it's not so much the plan as it is the planning process. And what happened tonight, I thought, was they exposed a situation where our process is a little bit out of sync and could be improved. So I guess that's what I would look for from, State Lands, and then from the airport, who's also an enterprise operation. So an observation, not a question.
Yeah, thanks. And I not to speak for Director Wiltshire, but I mean, that correlation I think is probably always at least at the forefront of the thinking when scheduling, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, this priority helps us a lot, and so my thought putting this together is that trying to address the policy issues up front. And so if the Harbor Commission meets on vessel insurance policy, it might be nice to meet on vessel insurance policy and then have a visit from Ventura or Channel Islands Harbor so that we're informed on those questions. And then you can all ask them that after we've had a discussion and presented on vessel insurance policy. So as best we can, we'll try and kind of schedule the policy item discussion prior to having a guest speaker, because then it can inform that guest speaker. Some of the ones that are outside agencies, you need to try and schedule them and make sure they can make it and make sure the dates work. And so, but to the best I can, it's nice to link them up with policy efforts.
Yeah, so I know that right after this, we're supposed to do our work groups. And so I don't know if the thought were that we were going to do the same work groups as we've had in the past, or if for some of these issues, like I'll just take the vessel insurance policy, for example, I think that it would be really great to have a few commissioners. Maybe we want to rethink some of our work groups so that we can actually have some of our commissioners do some legwork on some of these issues ahead of time, like the mooring policy, like the insurance one is the one. There's really more to it than we could ever get to in one commission meeting. But if three of us kind of went, and I know, Adam, that is an issue that you know a lot about. I've learned a lot about it over the last year. I think that it's something that we just absolutely have to look into. But I don't know that we would have time to do it in one commission meeting. So I just was thinking that maybe we were going to rethink some of those work groups based on those priorities, and then we would have, not, Commissioner Nelson, not throwing away anything that we've started, but trying to kind of look at some, maybe there's not a lot like on the BAP committee for this year, so maybe instead of
Well,
having
why don't we close out item number 4 and then move right into this discussion for 5?
Okay, but to that, I would just say on the calendar, it would be nice to have time for the commissioners to actually do some of that legwork before there were things brought forth. So, and I'll also make a pitch that I would love to see my ocean acidification, which was number 4, just right there. Just right there on here somewhere. So, at any rate, that's all I was asking if we were going to consider that tactic.
Sounds like we are. All right, so are there any other comments or questions on item number 4? All right, Nico, let's move right into 5.
Item number 5, Harbor Commission ad hoc work group assignments. Recommendation that Harbor Commission discuss and take action to reorganize, create, and/or dissolve existing ad hoc work groups and subcommittees and assign commissioner roles as needed.
All right, here we go. You might want to just repeat your comments, Commissioner Cohen.
You already heard them.
I did.
Do we get the list?
No
know
presentation,
we
but
were
we'll have the
making
list up on the screen, and what we're gonna do is we can toggle between the existing list, and then Nico and Caesar are just gonna update your guys' changes real time so you can see them. I will give kind of the city pitch that work groups are really intended to have kind of a discrete purpose, and so Commissioner Cohen's idea of kind of wrapping up the ones that are not doing any work is a good one. So work groups should have a discrete purpose. Once they're done with that work, they should kind of disband, and then you can create them again at a future date. And so it'd be nice to close out some of the ones that weren't doing as much work this coming year, and certainly open up some new ones that are.
How did that?
I think maybe we should clean up a few, on the slip assignment policy work group, I'm not a part of, and I'm not a chair.
And I'm on it.
And then
Yeah, that's Nelson.
He took
and-
me off.
and then Adam, you're the chair of the budget group, is that right?
I don't,
Feels like you should be.
I don't, I don't know, no, I don't think there is a chair for the
I
budget.
don't think
one.
we didn't really vote on.
But the issue with the budget is, we definitely meet once or twice a year, so, and for that, the mandate is to research and pass the budget in June, so I think that's why we continually have that one.
Vice Chair Stanwyck, is there a chair for the sleep assignment policy work group?
Yeah, I am.
John is.
I guess the first question is, do we think all of these are rational? All these groups are, none should be dissolved?
Well, I guess as the chair of the BAP committee.
And the commercial fishing work group.
I can deal with both of them, but I was going to suggest that the BAP committee may be a candidate for dissolving.
Right.
Because the issue that arose in public comment here at a commission meeting, and we received a request from the department to convene the BAP committee. We did that, and actions have been taken. So I guess from my standpoint, if I was to offer up one, I would suggest that the BAP committee could go, and the policy was revised as well for the first time in 11 years. So I just offer that as
Yeah, that was a
a comment.
pretty robust working group.
All right.
Done.
And for efficiency, we don't need to take a motion on all of them. We can kind of get it all
Yeah.
tailored and looking in one way, and then you can kind of
Then
make
just-
a motion all as it stands.
Sure.
So if I hear you, we'll redline the BAP one for now.
Commissioner Ford?
Along the lines of Commissioner Cohen's note about new or just doing the work ahead of time, I really think we could be helpful in possibly creating a work group on strategic planning, because this is something I've done so much throughout my career, but there's so much out there. Just before I came, I looked at the LA Port Strategic Plan. It's beautiful, it's easy to follow, it's concise yet detailed. So it might be appropriate for us to create a subgroup that actually does a little bit of the legwork on something like that, because notwithstanding all the important things that were on the previous report, I know that this group was pretty intense about the next step on a master plan for the Harbor Commission.
What would be the title for that group?
Well, strategic planning would be fine,
Yeah, fine with me.
simple. What do the rest of you think?
I'm all in on that.
I love it.
That was in fact one of my priorities. The last prioritization meeting was to look at business strategy, strategic plans, and so I would welcome the creation of a work group on that.
So we straw man that one, right? Save it for the vote on the motion. Is that what you're thinking, Director Wiltshire?
Yeah, that would be an efficient way to do it if we want to kind of get
Yeah.
this all laid out, and then you guys can tweak it a little bit more if you like, and then just take a motion on the whole,
Good idea.
Yeah.
the whole thing. Was the.
So who's doing the typing?
work group,
Caesar
strategic
is.
Planning work group. And while he updates, you guys are welcome to kind of throw out names too, or if you want to move people around, I can take note.
So Kate, or Commissioner Ford, you obviously want to be on that, is that right?
I do, if it's possible.
Me too.
It's quite possible.
Why, thank you.
I would love to join you.
I won't arm wrestle for it, but I'd like it.
Is that going to include lease
No,
criteria? No.
I don't
that's
think
not-
so.
that's-
No, I see it as sort of a high-level
Okay.
Who else wants to be,
roadmap of sorts.
who else wants to be? Michael Nelson, okay. Commissioner Cohen?
I mean, I think the chair should be on any strategic planning committees. So.
Well, that's what I'm kind of thinking too, not that, I mean, it's sort of a reflection of the larger group, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm fine.
I would give up my seat on the slip assignment policy work group.
Oh, man.
Because there's only one outstanding item, and it's not.
Valuation.
It's not really the work of the commissioners. It's waiting for a determination by staff as to which is the best way to do market valuations.
Method
And
evaluation.
so therefore,
yeah.
that could easily go, that whole group could go away if there was sort of an understanding
Well-
that that will be produced.
I think that because that was the number one issue for us to address when we did the Mentimeter was, slips.
Right. That's
And
right. Leave it.
So I feel like there's, I mean,
So broaden it beyond what it is now.
I think that we need to kind of go back and look at, the criticisms that are coming from the community with regards to slips not being accessible. I think that there was an email at our actually the guy that spoke at our prioritization workshop meeting at the beginning of it, that was his criticism. He's like, this harbor is basically an example of a public good that's not being used, always appropriately. So I don't think that we should get rid of the slip committee. I think that we should re-examine that issue and make sure that there's a lot of profiteers in the harbor, people that are, right now, someone's trying to sell their, space in the harbor for significant amount of money, and I don't think that
No, I'm with-
that's a public good.
I'm with
That's
you.
like
I'm
selling
just-
your campsite.
Director Wiltshire made a point that, work groups, ad hoc work groups, typically and normally have a discrete assignment. And the discrete assignment on the slip policy group as presently structured, it could easily be accomplished. Now, where you're going with it is to broaden it and add new discrete task and assignment to it.
Well, what was, on the Mentimeter, when we had slips, was like the number one prioritization or whatever, I don't know what the right word is. What was your idea, Director Wilshire, as to what we wanted to do there?
Commissioner Coyle, that one actually kind of surprised me. And so it was intentionally broad, so it involves terminations. We had recently gone through that, so there was some back and forth there. There was kind of the outstanding item with the previous slip policy subcommittee. But to your point with kind of the fairness and the pricing, and over the last kind of few years, that was hashed out in many subcommittee meetings and multiple Harbor Commission meetings. So a lot of that was handled by the slip assignment work group. We really kind of dove into everything and the reasoning behind it all, and the slip transfer policy. And so the gentleman's comment was largely discussed at the slip assignment throughout the 18-month process that we went through that. The outcomes were a changing of the transfer fee, a realization that there were sort of a few main categories where people were frustrated or complaining about sort of this transferring them to family members or inheriting them. And so we kind of went through all of these issues that people had complained about and either sort of debunked them or ran into some dead ends. And really where it boiled down to is, hey, this has been going on for a long time. Yeah, it's not the best system, but we're in it. We're kind of stuck in this scenario. And a lot of the room that we had to change is the slip transfer fee itself. And so that was the outcome of that. And so to Commissioner Nelson's point, he's correct. It's nice to define what these work groups are going to do, because by definition they have to have kind of an end. So I get a little weary when we're going to expand an existing one, because what that essentially says is, hey, this is just a standing subcommittee that's going to take on all sorts of things, which is what I've gotten my hand slapped for a couple times already. And so
I'm not trying to expand it. I guess I'm just trying to understand, and maybe I need to ask my fellow commissioners, when we had said, slips were our number one thing that we wanted to look at this year, then anchorage and mooring, then vessel insurance, and then lease policy. What did we mean when we said that was number one? Because I'd like to do that. It seems important.
Well, let me ask about a better understanding for what a work group would do when we all are so interested in the topic.
I think that they would understand, the criticism, from my understanding, and I'm just going to say what I understand, is that when we had that gentleman who said at the prioritization meeting, hey, this is still a problem, there is no accessibility within the harbor for people who want to actually get slips. Every slip that is transferred is transferring for dollar amounts that are totally inaccessible to the average person. And you guys know that's happening, and this is a public good, and you're not really doing anything about it. Then I think it's looking at that criticism to see, like, is there anything we can do about it, or is there nothing that we can do about it? I don't know.
I get that. I'm just trying to understand what a work group would do as opposed to the whole group.
I think they would try to understand the issue more and then bring that information to the commission, because I don't think, like, I would like to actually go talk to that gentleman and understand his issue. Or, you know, I mean, it's the one thing that's brought to me consistently is that there's this system that is, you know, makes it inaccessible for a lot of people to actually, you know, people that don't have, you know, the means to, I don't know. I don't know what we were thinking of when we put that at the top of the list, but I'm just, you know.
Well, I
That's
think
a-
it's a good point that we should, every work group should have a goal. So something they're coming back to us with. So it sounds like you're thinking that this work group would come back with a better understanding of the public's point of view? Is that what you're suggesting, that this work group would do?
What did it say in the last, on the Mentimeter? I mean, I think that that's what we were talking about when we said that we wanted to look at slip policy. But maybe we could make it slip and mooring policy, and then that group could also understand the mooring issues. I wish Merritt was here, actually,
Sure.
because I feel
Well,
like.
he would probably talk about operability, right? I mean, that seems to be an issue, operability.
Well, I think that he would talk about, you know, the accessibility issue. But I don't know. But I know that when we met for prioritization, like, you know, we were sitting next to each other, and I felt like that there was an issue there that needed to be resolved. And then I was also surprised when I saw a slip policy come to the top. So I was like, hey, we better do something about this. And I don't, you know.
Well, you could put, see, for me, one of the reasons I put slip policy there is this commission voted unanimously to look at whether it was possible to create more commercial fishing slips. So I just thought that's slip policy. So if you wanted to pull that away from commercial fishing and put it as one of the discrete tasks in a slip group, you could do that. I mean, I'm trying to be helpful here, I mean, because that's an outstanding issue that could easily be done as part of a larger look-see at slips.
Well, maybe we need to revisit that one when Merrick is here. I don't know how you feel about that, because he's actually not on any work groups right now either. I don't want to belabor the point.
We can stick him on one, though. He gave us his permission,
Yeah,
right?
you could put him on that one because
Yeah.
he made a statement, because
Yeah.
what Mike Wiltshire is saying is right. We spent a year and a half.
I was there, I remember.
And the reason why there's no public, there are no access for the public to get a slip. You either got to know somebody who owns a slip or a broker. That's why the slip transfers, where the newcomers are coming into that. It's not on a waiting list. So that part of the slip policy thing is done. And on the leasing policy, for example, it's the same sort of way. If you know somebody who's got a lease, then you can get a lease assignment or you can get it renewed. So,
Well, and
but
I mean,
you know,
just-
Merritt said everybody ought to have access to it, but I don't know how you do that given the work that we did on the history of.
there's a lot of like kind of, you know, I don't know better word to say it, like old-timey policy where like they have to, you know. I mean, talking to Jeanette at one point, like you have to do like what is it, like a raffle and you pull a
Yeah.
ball out.
Yeah, that's right.
It's all,
old-timey.
what the slip policy assignment group, they went through it in excruciating detail. And so we went down every road, and it's
But-
all there for a reason. And so the fairness is the slip transfer fee. And so that makes it somewhat okay in the State Lands Commission mind. It's this benefit to the waterfront. And so if you're looking at a purely fair way, just going purely to a wait list. You know, if somebody turns a slip in, the next person in line gets it.
Well, I think it's a good conversation to have, because I think that there's probably a more of a middle road. But what I don't like is that, you know, this is the city's harbor. This harbor belongs to everyone. And when someone goes and they sell their slip for $1 million, which happens, then that is a public good that is going into someone else's pocket. And the criticism there is legitimate. That money should be going back to the city. And we all kind of dance around the elephant in the room, but that's really what's happening. So I think that we need to look at that.
I've got a policy for you
did.
that Mike
Yeah.
Mike provided. Back in 1990, the state attorney general investigated this. There were 2 local grand juries, and the State Lands Commission investigated, and they made a recommendation back in I think it was 90, that we phase ourselves out of the slip transfers and basically slowly raise the slip fees to get there.
Yeah.
And then have a list. But there was a decision made by the city council at the time not to do that. And so now 40 years has gone by, and it's almost impossible to undo this.
I understand, and I think that there were efforts that were made, but it's not resolved. When slips transfer every year for $1 million or more, and there's one in the harbor right now that's for more than that, then,
There's a lot of nuance there. I'd say we try and get this back on topic. We're kind of getting into a pretty robust.
Well, yeah, and what I would suggest is this. I mean, I don't think we're as practiced at, you know, identifying the discrete objectives of the work groups. I think we're more practiced at identifying the need for the work group, right? So
work groups can be very focused, so that you guys could establish a work group to come meet with staff and determine
absolutely.
and determine what was done.
I think
at
we
the
just
past
want to get the
meetings,
names
bring everyone up
and
to
the groups.
speed, and
And
report
Mr.
back.
Chair, and to the chair, we eliminated one and we created one.
Right.
Let's call it quits.
We're done.
I think it's really a good reminder that these work groups are ad hoc in nature. They are
Yes.
temporary in
Yes.
nature. They are focused, they are finite. And if we just keep focused on that, it doesn't mean that a work group has to be created for everything we're worried about, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. So you can put my name on the strategic planning one, please. You're right, though, Commissioner Nelson, we're in balance.
Just trying to
Mike-
see an end to this process.
Mike, did you take your name off slip assignment?
I can, if somebody wants to get on there.
I think Merritt should be on there.
Put him on there.
Staff recommended, because, so John Stedman and Nelson went through the whole
Yeah.
tier thing. So some of the newer commissioners, it might be helpful to even just meet with staff as that work group, and we can bring you up to speed on what the subcommittee has gone through. 'Cause
I'd
kind
be
of
very interested in
The
joining.
root cause of that problem was sort of this fairness issue. And we spent almost 2 years and a lot of public comment, very similar to the comment that came at the workshop, dealing with exactly that. So we went through this in very, very, very much detail.
Yeah, it was
So-
very ardent and very voluminous comment.
Okay.
Or, I think we are going to replace Mike Nelson with Merritt, right? For the
No,
slip.
I thought,
And if there
For
could
a
be a
slip
place for
assignment?
me, I'd like to join, if possible, if 4 is okay.
4 is not okay.
Don't think four's okay.
Four's a
Four would
quorum.
be more than four would be a quorum.
Well, you're right, yeah.
I know, I'm with you, as I would also love to be caught up to speed, because it is a topic that through my 2 years has brought up
Well, that's why it
almost
has to
every
come to
meeting,
the big
but I
group
don't wanna-
anyway.
Yeah, I don't want to
Well-
lose all the history that the existing members have knowledge in their head by getting them off of the subgroup and then having to start from ground zero, which would be.
Staff would be happy to give a presentation on it at an upcoming meeting as to what was done and where we're at, and kind of a history
could-
and a primer.
Probably give the one we gave at the conclusion, right? It was,
We'd be happy to put
yeah,
something
I've got
together.
all the slideshows.
yeah, we can,
You want to go, Kate, and Merritt's not here, but I know he feels,
Well, I think it's fine to put him on that work group, and I like the idea of a presentation, and perhaps then the work group can take the deeper dive after the presentation.
Sure. And if Merritt doesn't want to be on it, Kate, then you can,
You could disband that work group, saying that the work was done, and we could have a presentation, and from that presentation,
Reform.
you could form a work group.
I like that idea. Get rid of this group. Well, and then schedule the presentation, and then we re-identify the interest, right? And then we'll stick 3 members on there.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm just a little weary about forming a work group without a discrete.
We don't want you to
We're
go
just kinda
to
forming
the
one.
department head meeting and say that you grew these work groups, okay? We're trying to help you out here, man.
Yeah.
But that's,
It's
but
the
that,
class joke that we do have more work groups than any board and commission. out
Okay, we're
there.
going to get rid of one.
Okay, so this is a suggestion to get rid of the work
Yes.
group for now.
Yes, and receive a presentation, and then we can,
That's a nice circle of the way it would work.
yeah.
I don't know why we have to get rid of it, but
Well,
No,
we can take an informal poll, right?
I was just echoing what Commissioner Nelson was saying. I mean, most of the work is done for it. I think there was one outstanding item that needed to be done. And a lot of the new questions and comments that have come in are from ones who
Right.
just are unaware that a lot of this has already occurred, which, you know, all this stuff is documented on our minutes of our agenda. And, you know, we're welcome to reference any of these and point these individuals to those. But yeah, I mean, the terms of equality and equity, I mean, we had the State Lands Commission or the California Coastal Commission
Yep.
weigh in on this prior. And all this has been worked out and completed.
So then, would you suggest the dissolution of the work group?
Yes, and to go with what the chair said. So,
Yep.
can I ask what, Adam, then do you think that we meant when we put that as the top priority?
yeah, I think it meant to finish that final outstanding piece of agenda item for the slip assignment policy.
Okay.
We'll strike it for now. I think we need to look at these as less finite. These are kind of flowing. The work groups can be added and, you know, so.
Yeah, that's
We
fine.
need to make a bit of an attempt to kind of close these out when the work task is done. It doesn't mean that there isn't more to do on slip assignment policy. It just means it has to be defined when we form a work group.
I think
And-
we'll
and
be
we're-
able to define it better. For the newbies, once we've received the presentation, I think we'll be
Perfect.
back up to speed.
Yep.
Like, I'm happy with the dissolution or the dissolve and then possibly firing it back up or something similar.
It is a good question, though, Commissioner Cohen. How did it make it up to the, to the,
Well, I mean,
to the
maybe,
top of the
I think
list?
next year, instead of just putting a word, we need to have like what that means because it's frustrating when something's a top priority and none of us can articulate what exactly we wanted that priority to be.
Well, I know in my mind it was about operability, so. And also the final determination on market valuation.
yeah.
So the other two were anchorage and mooring. We wanted to come up with a policy on that because I think that the city has asked us to, and then vessel insurance, a policy on that. So the question is, I know my poor Director Wilshire is looking at me right now going, are you trying to start 2 new work groups? Yes, I am.
Sounds like
I'm
it.
trying to start 2 new work groups. I think that it would be helpful if we looked into the anchorage and mooring issue and also the vessel insurance issue. But I'll just throw that out there.
But why wouldn't staff start first? I don't really understand this idea that a work group does the work that honestly is the responsibility and the purview of staff. So on those 2 things, why wouldn't we establish we want the information, so why wouldn't they, you know, to talk about this sort of process would be, they would make a presentation, we would decide if there's a big problem or not, and if we wanted more information, and if we thought a few of us could add to that or could take the burden of that.
It's a great point. It's a great point. So then I guess they would just need to, staff would need to know that we would hope for more than a presentation so that we could be actionable on those items when they come to us.
Because we received the presentation on both of those prior to you joining, and I know that the insurance one in particular seems one I'd be interested in exploring more for sure of. So I don't know if that means, as you said, I don't know if the timeline makes sense for us to create that group now, or I forget, did we vote on an action after the insurance presentation
Bjorn?
to pursue that further?
I can't recall offhand, but to Commissioner Ford makes a good point. It's nice to give the entire commission a chance to decide if you'd like to move forward on a topic or not. And so bringing vessel insurance as a policy, there could be a chance that 4 of you think, hey, this policy is fine as it is, let's not move forward. Staff should really be acting on the direction of the entire Harbor Commission instead of kind of 2 or 3 of you going off out in advance and sort of getting involved with that before the Harbor Commission has even directed us to move in that direction. So Commissioner Ford makes a great point there. And I can commit to making it so that during these policy presentations and when we bring a presentation, you as commission will have the ability to make a work group to kind of further research and bring something back to the commission if the presentation that we
Yeah, I
did
think
wasn't
that's pretty
thorough
clear
enough.
that can happen. You're right on the order, though, of operations, Commissioner Ford.
So now we're down to 3 work groups,
4.
1 subcommittee,
Well, correct.
3 and 1.
Yeah, 3 and 1.
Actually, is that a subcommittee or is it a work group? Because we've been operating as a work group.
The cruise ship subcommittee is the only one that is kind of standing as a subcommittee.
It's a subcommittee.
Of all of its meetings are Brown Act and agendized, and they have been thus far that I'm aware of.
Commissioner Cohen, do you have a thought about that? You certainly look like you do.
I think there was a conversation with the city attorney at one point that led me to believe that our cruise ship committee was a work group at this point and that it was not a subcommittee. That was my understanding.
Either way, I think with the amount of public involvement on that having agendized public meetings has been kind of a decision from the committee and staff, because going off now kind of behind closed doors would not really give the right approach. So I'm struggling to understand if there's a preference there.
I think, why don't we hear from the chair?
Just confusion, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I think there's definitely the importance of keeping the structure in terms of opening it up to the public and ensuring that they're there for the meetings. I think that's proved a backbone of almost all the policy that we will be suggesting come February. We also checked with the attorney to see if the 3 of us could chat without having a group, and he said yes, and we've done that. So it does feel like it is maybe somewhat of a hybrid, but in terms of the way that it is actually functioning and existing, I think it's a good structure, and I'm happy to keep it the way it is.
Yeah, I would agree with the chair on that.
Well, if you are meeting sometimes to talk things over without opening it up for following Brown Act, then it's a work group.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is.
And there's nothing to keep any of us from any of the work groups having a public meeting to get public input.
That's correct.
Right.
So I'd call it a work group.
I'd agree because we have been operating as a work group. And, you know, we did check with the city attorney before doing that to make sure that we were not doing anything inappropriate.
And technically, for example, take the budget work group. In terms of a discrete task, you can say, we're going to have a budget work group for the 23-24 budget, and that goes away, and then for the 25-26 budget, we're going to have a work group. And cruise ships, if you wanted to look at the cruise ship programs and the landing, you could do it every year. You could create a discrete work group to look at it, so. That would be great.
I want to make sure, though, that we're in accord here on this cruise ship.
I'll follow up with the city attorney. This isn't something that we're going to solve right here, right now, based on how it's been meeting. There's a potential, we have this scheduled to bring back to the entire Harbor Commission, so there's a potential that there aren't any more work group meetings, but potentially there are. And so I'll clear this up before next meeting. But I don't feel comfortable right now advising on the legality of this situation.
Could we just change the name, though, to work group so that we?
It's already changed.
Oh, okay. Then I guess we're done.
Go ahead, Commissioner Anderson.
No, I have nothing further to say.
Okay.
Does Merritt need to be on something?
Yeah, he does. Let's put him on something. Wait, before you say it. Oh, I guess there's no room. I don't think it's going to break his heart.
Okay. I don't think so either.
Yeah, but if we reform a slip assignment work
He
group
should, yeah, he
Yeah.
should be involved in that conversation, yeah.
First in line.
or anything else,
Yeah, thank you.
snack work group. You're the informal chair of that, so.
Yeah, he was fired up on that one.
I think you got a net reduction there, Director Wiltshire.
Definite net reduction.
That's reportable.
2024.
Chair Stebbin, I believe we need a formal motion and a vote.
Yes, do we have a formal motion to accept these changes?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Nico, do you want to read the motion, please?
Yes, I will read out the motion as well as each work group and the makeup of each work group. So this is a motion by Commissioner Ford, seconded by Commissioner Stanowick to fill each work group as I'm about to describe. So for the budget work group, it is Commissioners Anderson, Cohen, Stanowick. For the cruise ship work group, it is Commissioners Anderson, Cohen, and Stedman. The chartering and business activities permit work group is dissolved. The commercial fishing work group is Commissioners Nelson, Cohen, and Stedman. The slip assignment policy work group is dissolved, and establishing a new work group called the strategic planning work group, made up of Commissioners Ford, Stedman, and Nelson. Commissioner Ford, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray is absent. Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanowick,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen,
Yes.
and Chair Stedman.
Yes.
Okay, and that motion passes unanimously with Commissioner McCray absent.
All right.
Do you want to just take a picture of it just in case?
I like this policy in action, live policy.
Wait.
Director
All
Wiltshire,
right, you're
item
waiting on
number
me.
6.
I had a feeling you were waiting on me.
Yes.
So just one item on my director's report tonight, so an update on the December 28th swell and tide event that hit the harbor. Next slide. So a little background information on really what came together to create this situation. This was a long period winter swell, so 20-plus second period. And so a reminder, the period's essentially the wavelength, so a different distance between crests of the wave. And so longer period waves really just result in kind of more water moving on each wave itself. So a shorter period are smaller waves, and longer period are kind of longer, more powerful waves. it's not uncommon to have these large, long period swells in the Pacific Ocean in the winter. What made this one really unique was the direction. So the swell angle was between 270 degrees and 285 degrees, which is really due west. And so that kind of brings the bulk of the energy right into Santa Barbara, where typically winter swells come from a higher angle, 300 degrees and above, and Point Conception kind of naturally blocks Santa Barbara a bit from those swells. So the other major contributing factor were high tides. So we saw high tides during the peak swell that range from 6.4 feet to 6.8 feet. Higher tides are possible than this, so it could have been worse. The good things were there was no rain associated with the event, and there was minimal wind associated with the event. And so the main flooding occurred on Thursday, December 28th, which a little bit of additional flooding on Saturday, December 30th. And so this flooding was solely driven by the combination of swell and tide. Next slide. The good thing with these swells is we typically have advance. So swell models took shape 48 hours to 72 hours in advance on this one. So that allowed us a little bit of time to prepare. You never know exactly how it's going to come in, but we did take a number of actions to get ready. So we notified all slip holders, notified tenants both by email and in person. Staged a bunch of signage, made contact with all the anchorage and mooring, filled over 400 sandbags, which we used for ourselves and gave out to tenants. And the big helpful part was we staged heavy equipment and really coordinated staffing. It was the holidays, so a lot of the city departments were short-staffed, us being one of them, and so making sure we knew who was available. Next slide. So during the event, obviously our main focus was life safety, and our second focus was preventing property damage. So we implemented a number of hard closures: the Breakwater, Harbor Way, Yacht Club parking lot, Harbor West parking lot. Staff was on site, kind of really just working to manage the flooding, keep drains clear, and really keep people out of harm's way. It was sunny. It was a nice day. It was the holidays. It was really busy down there, and so kind of keeping people out of the way and out of the swell's way was our main objective. Next slide. So here's another picture of a photo of Harbor West parking lot, and so this was kind of partway through the event. Yeah, you can see people wanted to check it out. Lots of people down there. This wasn't even nearly as bad as it got. So next slide. And so this is also kind of from the same location, Harbor West parking lot. So you can see it brought about a foot or two of sand and debris and really covered the entire Harbor West parking lot almost to Cabrillo Boulevard. Next slide.
Whoa.
So what our main issue was flooding, sand and debris. So Harbor Way, this photo here, so Harbor Way was underwater for kind of 3 to 4 hours during that high tide window. Every wave would just essentially bring more seawater and sand in. Next slide. So this one just shows kind of the power of it all. This is the Yacht Club parking lot. You get a scale of the waves. They were just able to kind of throw those large rocks right up off the rock wall into the parking lot. Luckily, we gave the Yacht Club some notice, so they were able to clear their lot in advance. There were still a few vehicles that got sanded in and had to get towed out of there. So, but generally, they got the majority of their vehicles out in advance. And then kudos to staff on the cleanup phase. So again, this all happened over the holidays. So there's a before and after photo of Harbor Way. So this all happened in pretty short order over the holidays, kind of right over the New Year's window. Next slide. And again, Harbor West parking lot. So just a lot of sand moved. And so that took a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of time just to kind of scrape those lots and get the sand back onto the beach. Next slide. Happy to report, so through the event, there were no injuries, no deaths. Our main focus, again, was keeping people out of harm's way. So it did occur midday, sunny and busy. No businesses had to close, and we really saw minimal property damage. So really just signage, curbs, curb stops, trash cans, some picnic tables got washed and flipped, but all in all, very minimal property damage. Up on the screen right now is kind of our rough cost estimate of what it took to deal with this and clean it up. The majority was staff time, equipment, and supplies and materials that went into the cleanup phase. So not a horrendous number, but not something you want to be spending every weekend. And with this year being an El Nino year, it's very likely that something like this can happen again. There's a lot of luck involved, so it's really tide dependent. We have king tides mapped out for the remainder of the winter, and if a swell event happens to line up with one of those king tide events, this will happen again. And we'll see additional flooding. So with that, next slide, I'll turn it back to the commission.
Director Wiltshire, when you were showing the picture of rocks that were in the yacht club parking, was that are those from the revetment that was built last year?
Yeah, Chair Stedman, correct. Those came up and over from the rock revetment.
Wow. Commissioner Ford?
Clearly, there are aspects of this that made it sort of an anomaly. Was there anything that you learned that you can be more proactive about?
Yeah, Commissioner Ford, great question. So, not that it's lucky to see two of these things in 2 years, but you do learn a fair amount. We really learned kind of our pinch points of flooding. So that Harbor West area, the beach topography has changed dramatically from these storms. There's kind of a sand deficit, it appears, over there. So there's not a whole lot we can do over there to stop the ocean if it's a large swell and a high tide, but knowing to get vehicles out of there in advance, close it in advance, just makes it a lot more complicated if people have their vehicles that are sanded in there. And then Harbor Way. So the way water is managed, there's one critical drain in the center of Harbor Way. Keeping that clear is difficult at times. And the reality is that its outfall goes under City Pier, and at roughly a 6-foot tide and above, that outfall is underwater. So there's a period of time where water will just neutralize in Harbor Way and it has nowhere to go. Around and kind of down the alley behind our maintenance shop and then down past Brophy Brothers, that's sort of the secondary outfall area. It manages the water and debris a lot better, and it has kind of a wider outfall so it can take debris. And so getting water directed down in that way moves water out of Harbor Way more quickly. The reality is that flooding will occur on these. Flooding isn't the end of the world. If you can keep people out of harm's way and kind of keep buildings out of the way, it will subside. When the tide backs off, the flooding will stop. And so us kind of learning where we need to close in advance, getting that message out there that it's important. It's hard to close things when it's sunny and nice and there's no water there yet. People get really frustrated, but trying to message that and using these kind of pictures as examples of what can happen.
Sure, thanks.
Commissioner Nelson?
I vaguely remember a report, I think her name, Melissa Hetrick did the sea level rise report, I think it was. And stuck in my mind, it was like, damned if you do and damned if you don't. It was like you spend $4 billion to clean up the mess if it hits, if you don't do anything, but it's going to cost you $4 billion if you do something. So my issue is, as part of that analysis of the entire waterfront and the $4 billion cost to do something, was there a piece of it that dealt with the harbor and the harbor mouth that talked about structural things? You know, when you take a boat into Ventura Harbor, you know, there's a big rock jetty and berm out in front. So I'm wondering if there were any giant sort of maritime public works projects that were identified in the sea level rise report, that, because this is the second year, so it's no longer a historic event, it's now an annual event. So what do we do? Do we just, you know, let it take its path, or do we actually look at sort of extraordinary steps that we could take to protect the property?
Yeah, Commissioner, the latter. So we look at extraordinary steps. And so we're in a good spot right now. We received, as a city, significant funding for a 30-year sea level rise plan.
Right.
That's currently out for RFP right now. So we're looking for consultants to provide answers to that exact question, not only for the harbor, the waterfront,
That's
but
great.
also
That's
for
good.
desalination, our wastewater treatment plant, all of this critical city infrastructure that's impacted. But obviously, we're the front lines, and so a lot of that will pertain to what do we do here in the harbor? What do we protect? Where do we retreat? What do we save? And so that's pending, and we should have something tangible within a year or so.
That's very reassuring. In fact, in terms of presentations that would be of interest to me, it would be much, I'd rather talk about the future and how we're going to deal with this than a cute presentation about, its history.
Where we get the billions of dollars is a bigger question.
yeah. But it's a problem that municipalities and counties up and down the coast are going to have to deal with. So anyway, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Guess we'll move on to item number 7.
Good evening, Commissioners. So as part of my business services report, I bring an update of several tenant projects taking place along the waterfront. The majority of these projects I've discussed previously at past meetings, and few are new due to unplanned circumstances. But I will provide an update on a list of venues we have here, businesses. So I'll begin with the Anchor Rose Lounge that has been undergoing renovations for several months, over 8 months, to improve the interior space as well as the exterior ADA access points. That includes ramps and some of their patio access areas where you see all the glass doors. So the business is currently on the second month of a 3-month deferment, a rent deferment that was recently approved by council. And in that regard, the owners are ready to open, but at the same time, they're revisiting their business plan as far as how they're going to operate this place. It's very early stages, but they've been in discussions with local fishermen to either become partners or assign this space to ocean-minded, like local fishing type of venue that will provide fresh seafood as in a restaurant setting at this location. Again, it's early stages, but
That's great.
the owners are considering reviewing their business plan as is right now, and they're continuing to work with the renovations, working with funding, and hopefully we'll see the space open. Again, the upstairs remains open. It's just the downstairs space that hasn't operated in months. The next one is the Sushi Go-Go. And this business has been closed since early December, primarily because they were conducting renovations and work needed within the space without realizing they needed a building permit. Therefore, they were issued a stop work order early in December, and currently they are in the process of obtaining those permits. So talking with planning, as Commissioner Cohen mentioned earlier, if we've been in discussions with the planning division, we have, and the projected time they'll likely get their permit to start this process and continue with construction will be early February. So we look forward to seeing this place open, but it's been a significant impact to the area, to our visitors, as well as to our revenues, which depend on. Next, it's the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum Coffee Shop, and I'm happy to update you that they're almost to completion. So we have Dark Coffee, which is a local coffee house already established in town, and they're likely going to open soon. They're wrapping up a few parts, last pieces of the project, including a new water meter, and also adding new equipment for the functionality of the coffee shop. But their goal is to open mid-February, likely on Valentine's Day, per what the owner was saying just a few days ago when we met. But the place is looking fantastic. They're looking at having some marble counters in the outside patio.
That's great.
It'll be really inviting and also be a complement to the whole Maritime Museum area. So we're really looking forward to this project. The next one is the Santa Barbara Landing remodel. This is a much larger project, as you've been informed in the past, and they're making headway. They're going through the design approval following an initial review in 2023 with the Architectural Board Review, ABR. So now they received some guidance from the review board, and now they're planning to go back with a refined plan of the design. And then on that regard, they're working with the engineering teams and planning to finalize the plans for the actual building, while working with several city divisions, including planning, transportation, and creeks on details of the construction. Again, this place will have, in addition to enhancing the retail section and services as a landing area, they will provide a patio space that will have provide a coffee shop atmosphere in the back. Then, as discussed earlier in the meeting, the Harbor Restaurant has experienced significant water damage. We discussed this item at large earlier. So currently, we are waiting for their permits to go through the process, and hopefully they'll be able to commence their repairs, emergency repairs. And as mentioned as well, they're going through a 3-month rent deferment through council, which is the next step after your recommendation issued today. So also, I'm happy to report that as of this month, Moby Dick's Restaurant has successfully acquired their building permits. It's been a month in the process, and they're commencing work for the clam bar. It's going to be on the north side of the building, which is as you enter the main door, it'll be on your right-hand side. So the good thing is during the construction project, the restaurant itself will remain open, so it'll be open for business. I want to make sure that we put that out there, because a lot of times when we have these construction projects, there's an assumption that the businesses are shut down completely, which in this case it's not. And with that, I would like to emphasize that we're pleased to see progress in a lot of these projects that have been going on for months, and we're trying to provide as much administrative support to the projects that just came to light as of this past December, which primarily Sushi Go-Go and Harbor Restaurant. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Nelson?
I know this is a far-fetched idea, but all of these projects are, one, important to our budget and the revenue streams that we have to operate the waterfront. Is there a way that we could approach the planning department, because these are all public properties and they're all owned by the waterfront department? Could the waterfront department some kind of bundle these projects and help them through the business process? I mean, the vendors and the lessees, they've got to pay the freight for the specs and the engineering and all that. But if the city sort of looked at this differently, this is a big project for the waterfront department. It's all public property. And would there be a way to smooth this out? Because what happens is everybody's on their own to try to get through this process, as opposed to us kind of putting our people, our buildings, wrap them up in a big bundle and try to move the bundle through the process, as opposed to what's going on now. Because I'm amazed. There's like 7 projects and they're all tangled up somewhere over it, in planning.
Good question.
As opposed to just one. This is the waterfront's, building project list that they all need permits for.
Commissioner Nelson, that's a very good point. But all these projects are very unique in their scope of work. Some, like for example, Moby Dick's, they've been months planning, going through the process, basically doing it the proper way, and planning accordingly, working with us. Other have not. So, and also, as far as trying to bundle them all together, we have to go through the public process. So we can't take a priority over another public project. Could be another resident in Santa Barbara, as far as trying to get any,
I hear you.
specific review of these projects. They're all very unique as well, which require different types of reviews. So to bundle them all together, it'll be a bit challenging. And also, these are tenant projects. They're being funded privately by the tenants.
Right. I was just trying to look at it like a park.
Right.
That here's a park, and in this park, we're going to do a major renovation and renewal. And we're going to fix this bathroom, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that. And we take the whole thing through the process. I understand.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. It's just right now, this is very unique, what's been happening over the last few months, especially with the tenants that are not able to operate because of lack of
Right, I mean, they're
permits.
shut down.
A lot of it is beyond our control.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, I think it is exciting to see all these projects. Really, it's funny that it's all happening. Feels like
Right. It's like,
at once, which is great to see. But just kind of echoing your thoughts, Cesar. I think in terms of the public perception, if we were to kind of bundle it and
Yeah.
push it through
Yeah.
from a private person to be like, well, why does the city get to prioritize, and
I
they're
got
already
it.
getting rent deferment, and,
I-
you know, the
Said
city's
my
a pretty good
partners.
landlord with no depositor, et cetera, so I could see there being some issues there. But really what I wanted, my only real question was DART's menu. Have we seen the food menu? Is it gonna be similar to the existing one? Is it gonna expand? Do we know? Is it just a small shop with just coffee, or what kind of food offerings are they gonna have, do you know?
Commissioner Anderson, I believe the model is very similar to their other businesses in the city. As far as size of this, I'm not aware of the square footage of the other locations, but this location will be able to offer, I believe, full service as a coffee shop and pastries, gourmet coffee.
Could I just add something? They actually came and spoke to the Maritime Museum Board on Monday. And if you've been to a DART, it's very limited what they offer in terms of food. It will not be more. It's usually prepackaged and usually from another vendor. So there won't be any cooking per se there.
Thank you.
But it's going to be great.
I can't wait.
They think it's going to be their biggest shop.
Are they going to require board members to be baristas?
Maybe. They are building this, as you were alluding to, this lovely counter that you'll be able, a marble counter that you can stand or sit along that looks out onto the harbor. And so, it's a great view, other than the Maritime Museum's view on the fourth floor.
Vice Chair, you want to?
I have a question, sorry. Oh,
Yes.
did you have a question too?
I was just going to move on to that. Yep.
Yeah, I figured you were. Is that the latest information about Sushi Go-Go? Because there's a lot of talk about it just closing down.
Commissioner Ford, yeah, there's a lot of chatter out there, but
Right.
I've been communicating with the contractor that's currently working for the owner and the building department. So the information I'm providing to you today is just strictly based on what's been communicated to us through the building and safety department and their contractor. But yeah,
Good.
there's,
I hope they don't close, but it's tough out there.
yeah.
All right, any staff communications?
Nothing more to add tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to take this time just to thank staff for the comments regarding the Ledbetter bathrooms earlier today. I just, out of respect for everybody that showed up for public comment, I thought that was appropriate. So thanks for that. And also, I think just like probably the most efficient way going forward was maybe just to have that on the next facilities report. And I think that would kind of provide some light onto what's going on for everybody. So.
Yeah, we'll try and get that on either the February or the March, depending on how much time we need to get it together, but nothing will happen with the project in that period of time, so either one of those.
Great, thanks. Also, too, just wanted to give a comment on, on the suggestion of one of Commissioner Cohen's comments in one of the previous meetings was just to have communication with other parks or other commissions. And one of the ones that interests me is Parks and Rec, and predominantly because during, I believe, when we were talking about the cruise ship program, we had talked about the West Beach wading pool and that area right there. And I just want to communicate that I reached out to the Parks and Rec director just to get an update on that. And what she communicated to me was that they're working with a pool consultant to really assess the options for kind of redeveloping that area and doing a feasibility study. So I'm kind of just curious on that area because it's, it kind of infringes with the harbor and waterfront. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That's all the commission communication from me. Anyone else care to comment on anything?
Well, I just wanted to say, Caesar, I really appreciated the email you followed up from our priority workshop. I read through, this is a great report, by the way. If you haven't read through it, I just learned so much about the harbor. I think that the 5-year study of leases, when, is that next meeting or the meeting after?
I think we currently have it scheduled on the March meeting.
Okay. It would just be, I mean, I don't know if it's possible, but it would be helpful to have, because I don't know, sometimes there's a lot to go through and I'm trying to find time to read everything. So it'd be helpful, because it took me a while to get through this, to have it earlier than later, just to make sure we get through it. But I just wanted to say that that report's fantastic. If anyone hasn't read it, I'm looking forward to reading the new one. There was just so much to it. Thank you.
Right, I just want to say congratulations to Commissioner Nelson on your reappointment. I was hoping Merritt would be here too, so we could congratulate him as well. So
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
look forward to your contributions.
All right, any other commissioner communications? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjourn, thank you.